term cold case refers to a crime investigation that lacks evidence, leads, and other information necessary to move the case forward. Once this dead end is hit, a case may be set aside for years or even decades and is deemed cold. This often causes the families of victims to lose hope of ever seeing justice served or being given answers to the burning questions that could likely ease their grief. Luckily, not every cold case stays that way forever. These 5 cold cases had major breakthroughs and were solved decades later. Number 5. Nova Welsh chose to move out of her family home and move in with her boyfriend, Osmond Bell. The couple had 2 children together, and while some outsiders would describe their long-term relationship as happy, Nova's family and friends later described it as unhappy and even abusive. Reports claimed that the couple fought frequently and that Osmond lost his temper from time to time. The pair eventually parted ways, and Nova moved on to a new life, which included a new and happy relationship. In August of 1981, Nova's family and younger siblings made a big move and tried to contact Nova to tell her the good news and pay her a visit. Unfortunately, no one in the family was able to get in touch with her. A longtime friend of Nova's told the family that she hadn't seen Nova since July 22, 1981, about a month earlier. A visit to her home revealed that her laundry had been left out for several days. This struck worry for Nova's family, so a missing persons report was filed. It was later found that her children, who wrote public statements in the paper begging for their mother to return home, were told that she was out for a short time to get them candy, but she never returned. A search began, and a few weeks later, Nova's family received an anonymous letter which seemed to have been written from the point of view of a woman that noticed Nova and then her boyfriend, Wayne, getting into a fight in the apartment complex due to Wayne allegedly striking her. A search continued, and thanks to the complaints of her neighbors, in reference to a foul smell coming from the basement, Nova's body was found. She'd been stuffed at the back of a storage cupboard in the basement. She was in pajamas and clearly had been assaulted. There was an abundance of DNA at the scene, not only on the victim, but in the general area as well. In fact, the lock of the cupboard had been poorly secured by a large wad of chewing gum. The gum was tested, but thanks to a lack of DNA technology at the time, a match couldn't be found. Osmond Bell, Nova's ex-husband, was apprehended and interrogated in the early stages of the investigation. He denied any involvement in the case, stating that the last time he saw Nova was July 25th, 2 days before the estimated date that she passed away. Despite evidence, leads, and over 300 witness interviews, the case went cold as there seemed to be no progression for months. Nova's case lay dormant for decades before it was finally cracked in 2016. The DNA samples from the gum, as well as the anonymous letter, were retested using improved technology and research methods. The gum turned out to be a strong match to Osmond. The letter sample was deemed incomplete, but apparently also matched Osmond and the gum. As a result, Osmond was arrested in August of 2016, over 30 years after the crime. In March of 2017, the murder charges against him were dropped due to a lack of evidence that the crime had been pre-planned. However, he was still convicted of manslaughter, meaning that even though proper justice may not have been served in the eyes of many, Nova's family was finally given answers and closure. Nova's sister later said about her sister that she can finally rest in peace. Number 4. On Monday, July 22, 1957, late at night in a small suburb of El Segundo, 2 partners, Officer Richard Phillips and Officer Milton Curtis, were partaking the streets on a lookout for any suspicious activity. The pair was parked in their car near a busy street when they saw a driver slowly stop before a stop sign and search the area. After allegedly seeing that there were no cops around, he decided to run the red light. The officers took off toward the street, blaring their sirens and flashing their lights to signal the driver. He reluctantly pulled to the side of the road, and a routine traffic stop was expected to follow. Things didn't go according to plan, though. Officer Phillips exited his car and approached the driver, ready to issue a ticket. Officer Curtis stayed in the car as backup for his partner. As Phillips was writing the ticket, a second patrol car passed by. Since neither officer expected a hassle out of the driver, the second car was waved away. As soon as that patrol car was out of sight, the officers were attacked as a rain of gunfire filled the air. Both taken by surprise, neither officer had the time to react to protect themselves. The partners were badly wounded by 3 shots each and passed away at the scene. The suspect took off, and just a few hours later, an all-out search for the criminal was sparked. Officers from all over the county, as well as a vigilante citizen group, took part in the search, hoping to search for the killer with a spoonful of justice. The The suspect's vehicle was later found abandoned near a wooded area. Crime scene investigators collected bullets that had been lodged in the vehicle from the officer's defensive shots. However, not every bullet that was shot was actually found. This produced a theory that the suspect still had at least one bullet with him, likely inside of him. Fingerprints and a rough sketch on witness reports led officers in the right direction, but the case went cold for 3 years. In 1960, the weapon used in the crime was found and traced back to a purchase in Louisiana. The suspect had used a fake name to obtain the gun, though the case went cold once again. In 2002, about 45 years after the crime, a witness called El Segundo police to report that their uncle had mentioned his involvement in the crimes. They compared fingerprints from the scene with those of the 60-year-old man and found an exact match. In 2003, Gerald was arrested at his home. During further investigation, officers found that Gerald had a scar from a gunshot wound, which served as even more evidence against him. He was later charged, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Gerald apparently went on to live a happy, healthy, and seemingly normal life after his crimes. He had a family, a peaceful retirement, and much more. He probably thought that he would go the rest of his life without facing justice, but thanks to the witness statement, the case was finally solved decades later. Number 3. In 1986, Cyrus Jefferson moved to San Diego where he could be closer to his sister and start a new life. The hopeful young man was ready to start fresh and leave the worries of his old life behind him. He was eager to see his bright future unfold, and he became friends with a man named Stacy Littleton. The pair were good friends and made plans to rent an apartment together, although witnesses had reasons to believe that the plans would never unfold, although it's not exactly clear why. On October 11, 1986, in the early morning hours, a passerby happened to cross paths with a horrific crime scene. Officers arrived and the body was quickly identified as Cyrus. Details about the exact cause of death have barely been discussed, but it's clear that he was attacked and foul play was involved. The victim's remains and other crime scene evidence was collected. One key piece of evidence was a disposable glove that detectives theorized contained traces of DNA with the killer. Stacy was arrested as a prime suspect under a murder charge. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence and the fact that technology wasn't advanced enough to link the glove DNA to Stacy, he was released. After this, detectives were unable to move forward with any more leads of information. The case was set aside as urgent matters were attended to, and it inevitably went cold. 3 decades later, in 2017, a cold case specialist detective was assigned to reinvestigate the death of Cyrus Jefferson. The detective made an important first move by having the key piece of evidence, the glove, retested using new technology. The results came back and showed significant traces from both Cyrus and Stacy, offering enough evidence for charges to be filed. Stacy was in prison for drug-related crimes at the time and was forced to face a new count of murder. A trial followed, and in 2018, he was found guilty of the murder and sentenced to 26 years in prison. Number 2. While this case lacks viable details of the initial crime, the outcome is enough to make it compelling. Patricia Ann Greene was a 34-year-old single woman who was viciously attacked by a male suspect in 1987. Her body was dumped in a drainage ditch near National Guard base. She was found by chance when a passerby noticed the human-like shape lying in the muddy ditch. Officers arrived to the scene and collected the remains as well as all possible evidence. Patricia had been wounded in her chest by a shot. DNA was found at the scene and on the victim's body. Sadly, because of the technological setbacks of the 80s, a match wasn't found. Very few leads and no witness reports and untraceable DNA were all that they had. The case was forced to go cold after only a couple short months of investigation. In 2017, cold case detectives were assigned to reopen Patricia's files and try to move the case forward. They sent her clothing to the sheriff's forensic lab to be tested using their new database system. Although it took some time, results later showed a match to then 53-year-old Philip Johnson. The suspect was already serving multiple life sentences for murder and other charges. Officers met with Philip in prison to present a newfound evidence to him. Allegedly, he quickly confessed as though unbothered by the charges. He even provided detectives with an in-depth description of his crimes, sharing intimate and previously unknown details of his wicked behavior. Later, it was revealed that Philip had taken the lives of 2 more women other than Patricia, and 2 women after her. And he was caught, charged, and tried. As far as his motive, there didn't seem to be much of one other than the obvious fact that he was a cold-blooded criminal. The victims were not connected or chosen in any specific way. He was charged for the cold case murder and will never see the light of day outside of prison gates. Number 1. This case isn't just creepy and unsettling in the traditional sense. It features a peculiar detail that makes it even more horrifying for some. The suspect was wearing a clown costume at the time of the attack, and the case has since been known as the Killer Clown Cold Case. Colleagues, friends, and relatives of Marlene Warren knew that she was a fan of clowns and clown-related artwork, which may seem strange to some. Marlene was in no way prepared to face the clown that would knock on her door that fateful evening in 1990, though she would certainly not be inviting this clown in with open arms. That's because this clown was there to take her life. The clown approached Marlene's home, carrying balloons and flowers. As Marlene answered the front door, the clown pulled out a gun and shot her, causing her to slump to the floor where she was later found by investigators. The clown fled the scene in a white sedan and was never seen again. In the original investigation, both Michael Warren, Marlene's husband, and his alleged mistress, Sheila Keene Warren, were arrested as suspects. At the time, there was not enough evidence to move forward with these two leads or the case in general. Although suspicions that one of them was guilty were shared by police, nothing could be done. The case went cold and was left stagnant for many years. After sitting still for 27 years, the case was revisited thanks to a witness testimony. John Moran Sr. was an automotive mechanic that spent his life adjusting odometers and chopping cars. He grew very ill in 2018 and ultimately made a deathbed confession to his son, John Moran Jr. He was involved in helping Michael and Sheila cover up their crime by sinking the car into a nearby lake. Officers pulled the car from the murky waters and found the infamous clown suit, which contained DNA of both Michael, Sheila, and their alleged victim. This case is still ongoing, with both suspects now facing a pricey trial. The couple will face their sentences sometime in the coming years. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/ty_knots. And if you like this video, be sure to click that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads.